Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 8 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation Point. We begin this segment with many cars driving up to a mountain at nighttime. The Sector V operatives of the Kids Next Door are watching this from the edge of a forest on the other side of the mountain, and number one is telling his teammates how he was right that the teenagers are up to something. We then get 4 different flashbacks, and in each of these flashbacks, number one and one other Sector V operative are eavesdropping on a conversation between teenagers. All of these conversations have something to do with a place called the Point, and they all involve the general idea of people changing forever when they go to the Point. And in 3 of the 4 flashbacks, the teenagers catch the Sector V operatives eavesdropping on their conversation. Back in the present day, the Sector V operatives are surprised at how many cars have arrived at the mountain. They figure that every teenager in the town has gone to this mountain, but we see that there's at least one teenager who didn't go to the mountain, and he's sad that he didn't go to the mountain. This mountain is the location of the point that the teenagers have been talking about. And number one is pretty confident about what the teenagers are planning to do at the Point, but the other Sector V operatives don't know what number one is talking about. So number one says that he believes that the Point is a factory that was created by adults to help the teenagers out. More specifically, number one believes that teenagers can't wait to become adults so they can boss kids around. So he thinks that this factory at the Point is where teenagers go so that they can become adults early, so that they can get right to bossing kids around much quicker than they would if they just grew up normally. And the Sector V operatives are now concerned about the adult population of the town growing significantly because of this factory. Number one says that what they're going to do is try and pinpoint the exact location of the Point. Once they have the exact coordinates, they'll use the condiment cannon, a satellite that launches mustard. They're going to use the condiment cannon to launch mustard at the Point, the factory, so that they can knock the factory out of the mountainside and destroy it, so that they won't have to worry about the teenagers becoming adults quicker than expected. So the Sector V operatives head off to the mountainside to reach the Point. First, they're going to try and interrogate one of the teenagers that they think are still in one of the many vehicles that have parked on the mountain. So they break open one of the car doors, and then they try to interrogate one of the teenagers in there. But when they look into the car, they're horrified by the sight they see. Well, except number 2. And 4 of the Sector V operatives hide because they're like, how can anyone do something that they saw in the car? What was it that they saw in the car? A lot of messy food that's, they see a lot of food that's been sitting in the car for who knows how long. So, yeah, they're pretty grossed out that they didn't clean up the car. Well, except number 2, he thinks that cheese fries, he says cheese fries taste better after a few days, and he actually eats some of it. And number 4 joins in on eating these cheese fries too. So anyway, with that dealt with, the Sector V operatives decide they should try and check the other cars to see if there are any other teenagers still in the cars. But no, they don't see any other teenagers in the cars or vehicles that have been parked on the mountain. However, they do eventually find a couple. 2 teenagers are walking down a trail, a pathway, and they eventually reach a wooden staircase that's heading down somewhere. And the teenagers head down the staircase, and number one figures that this must be the location of the point. And he's bragging about how the teenagers showed them where the point was. So the Sector V operatives activate the condiment cannon, or rather, they set up the countdown to activate the condiment cannon, I should say. It's going to take 2 minutes before the condiment cannon is fully charged and prepared to launch the mustard towards the point. So, with the timer set, the Sector V operatives are preparing to leave the mountainside, but then several security guards arrive to stop them, and the security guards are amused about the kids already knowing about the point, since they say, or at least one of the security guards said that he didn't find out about the point until he was 16 years old, I believe. But eventually, the security guards decide to actually take the kids next door to the point, because they say something along the lines of their boss having something planned at the point for kids. So the security guards take the kids next door to the point, and the kids next door are baffled to see that the point is actually a roller skate rink. Yeah, it's a roller skating rink, not a factory as they originally thought. And the security guards explain that the boss of the point is actually the boss of the point is planning to eventually have a kids' night so that kids can go to the point, not just teenagers. And some of the teenagers also explain about how you learn how to roller skate when you leave the point. That's what changes you forever. And number one is just baffled that he was wrong about the factory. And two of the teenagers, at least, are rather friendly, but they're also kind of amused by number one not realizing that the point was a roller skate rink. A roller skating rink. And they're questioning number one, like, what did he think that teenagers would go up to a mountain in the middle of the night to do? And number one is, it takes him a while to fully say it, but he eventually admits he thought that the teenagers were going to a factory to change them into adults. And it's after number one finishes his explanation when the timer for the condiment cannon goes down. So the condiment cannon launches mustard at the point. The teenagers and the security guards aren't happy about this, and then the point falls out of, the point then falls down the mountain as a result of the mustard from the condiment cannon. Next up, we see the Sector V operatives are back at their treehouse, but they're all tied up and they're sitting on a couch while they're tied up, and they're forced to watch as the teenagers and the staff of the point have turned the Sector V treehouse into a temporary roller skating rink until the point is fixed up, and that's how we end the segment. So this segment introduces teenagers in a more significant role. This segment is what brings the teenagers into a prevalent role within the series, and it stands out as being quite different from how teenagers would go on to be portrayed later on in the series, starting with Season 2. Although you could easily explain that as probably the teenagers present in this segment are just normal everyday teenagers. They're not like the teenagers that we eventually see in the later seasons, the teenagers that are part of a particular group, and we'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. But even when you take that into account, you could still make the argument that this segment still has some early installment weirdness, in the sense that it has the early installment weirdness that was generally present in Season 1 of the series, the kids next door coming off as less heroic than they end up being portrayed in the later seasons. And that's the case here because the Sector V operatives thought that the teenagers were up to no good, wanting to become adults quicker than they would normally so that they can boss them around. And amusingly enough, the teenagers in this segment are actually rather friendly, and They only really act antagonistic towards the Sector V operatives when they caught them eavesdropping on their conversation or when they use the condiment cannon on the point. And I would say those are very understandable reasons to be. They were very reasonable reasons for why they were antagonistic towards the Sector V operatives. Otherwise, they were actually quite friendly to them. So, yeah, you could say this segment does portray the Sector V operatives in a less heroic light because, yeah, they kind of did ruin the fun at the point. Although some might also make the case that they thought that it was because they were planning a factory to turn them into adults quicker, the teenagers. And, well, to be fair, some other segments, even within season 1, do kind of have those similar ideas that sound rather outlandish on paper, but within the context of the series, they do end up happening. So there are some examples in the series where the kids next door, number 1 in particular, come off as properly paranoid. It just so happened that this was not the case in this segment. This segment was not an example of properly paranoid. And yeah, so you could argue there is some early installment weirdness here, but you could also kind of see where the kids next door were coming from, even if they ended up being wrong in this particular case. Now, the adults too. Like I said, while the teenagers were portrayed as a friendly bunch, the adults in this segment were also portrayed as pretty reasonable as well. They weren't portrayed as malicious or antagonistic. So you could say this is another example of season 1 showing not all adults are bad, which is something that becomes more prevalent in the later seasons. Because although we don't actually meet the boss of the Point, we do hear that the boss of the Point was planning to open up a kids' night for kids so they can go to the Point. And I might as well bring it up now. Although we don't actually see the Point again later on in the series, a later segment in season 1 does bring up the Point, and one of the Sector V operatives does end up going to the Point. We'll go into greater detail about that when we do the recap and thoughts video for that particular segment. But yeah, the Point is eventually restored, and they do end up opening up Kids Night at the Point after all. And one of the Sector V operatives is able to go to the Point without any difficulty. So you could probably say that the Sector V operatives and the staff of the Point, and maybe the teenagers there probably mended fences afterwards, so there's no ill will afterwards. So again, that's more like they don't outright say that. That's more just filling in the blanks that we don't get to see or hear just filling in blanks that aren't present in the actual segments later on. But yeah, they do bring up the Point again later, and we know it seems like everything worked out in the end. So yeah, this was a pretty fun segment overall. Oh, and yeah, there were a lot of jokes in this segment that kind of, back when I first saw it as a kid, those jokes kind of flew over my head. And I'm sure that's the case for other viewers who were kids when they first watched this segment. But when you go back and see this segment later on in life, it's like, now you know what those jokes were. And well, that happens in a lot of shows. There's a lot of shows where they have those jokes that would fly over a younger viewer's head, but they become more clear to an older viewer's head. Although, yeah, I can definitely understand. I can understand the sentiments about being grossed out about leaving food in a car or a vehicle. Like, I definitely try to keep my vehicles clean. Like, I never really like messy stuff myself, so I can understand the Sector V operatives being unnerved by the sight of a messy car. But otherwise, yeah, so this was a pretty fun segment overall. Like, you could still see some early installment weirdness here, but it was also a nice segment that showed not all teenagers and not all adults are bad. So again, it's another example of season 1 showing those shades of gray that become more apparent in the later seasons of the series. So, and yeah, we do get like I said, we do get the Point mentioned again later on. So you could say that's another hint of the show having a stronger sense of continuity or having a serialized nature that's not immediately present in season 1 compared to the later seasons. But otherwise, I believe that's it for this particular segment. So as of this video, we've now discussed the Bees segment of episode 8 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.